Hi, everyone. Welcome and good day to all, whatever time it may be in your time zone. For many years now, we have watched the education profession falter. Too few people coming into the profession, too many places around the globe with unqualified and underqualified teachers, and too many qualified teachers leaving the profession too soon. I'm Carole Basile. I'm the Dean of the Mary Lou Fulton Teachers College at Arizona State University. And today we're going to talk about the normal, but what we hope will be what we would say is the next normal: learning teams, global evidence, and impact. What we have always thought about is normal: teachers who know how to be able to do everything, novices who can walk into a classroom and be day one ready, alternatively certified teachers who would get us more high quality teachers faster, and dare I say more, professional learning, standards, curricular changes that we believe would ultimately solve all the problems. None of these can be the norm anymore. It is not working. The norm that I find probably most egregious, the one that we have been talking about now for a number of years, not just since the pandemic or because of the pandemic, is really the isolating and inflexible working and learning environment of educators, otherwise known as the one teacher, one classroom, or egg crate model of education. And for many reasons, I find it to be unreasonable and probably immoral that we take a young teacher, we put them in a classroom, and we say, you have to know everything and be everything for all of the students in that classroom. It's time to start thinking about how we change that learning environment for both teachers and for learners. And by doing so, also change so much more. Education, we know, depends on quality educators. So we are asking, what if we could design a system that is equitable for both teachers and learners? It's time to think about what we need, not as a recruitment and retention problem, but as a workforce design problem. What if those of us who prepare, certify, deploy, fund teacher preparation programs, think about teachers, think about schools, could now think hard about this and what it means for our work and our programs? Today, learners actually need teams of people who can distribute expertise, personalize learning, and deepen learning. The pandemic has just exacerbated all of this, made this more important today than it probably ever has been. Educators need the professional satisfaction and efficacy that comes from working in self-improving teams of adults to solve problems together. And they need meaningful advancement pathways to different and potentially new kinds of roles. The whole system needs a research agenda that addresses questions of this systemic performance. Ultimately, the question becomes, if we're not getting the education workforce or the learning outcomes that we want, can we redesign the profession, the workplace, and how we prepare people for both? At Arizona State University, we've been working on this for the past 4 years. Restructuring teacher and leadership preparation, we're helping reorganize schools and educators into teams across multiple classrooms. We're finding ways to think about how we distribute the expertise of teachers on teams, creating advancement opportunities, working with experts on personalized, competency-based, and deeper learning, and providing teacher candidates with more specializations in paid and non-paid, team-based residencies, and much more. As we work to change working and learning environments for professional educators, we're also thinking about how to empower community members and parents to complement the work of teachers and schools. Our schools desperately need people, but they desperately need people who are trained in a consistent manner, who have a toolkit of effective instructional practices. It also means that we get smarter and better at using technology as part of the team to create high-tech, high-touch environments. So imagine for a moment that we could break the one teacher, one classroom model, that we could leverage all of our assets in new ways, working with partners, to actually create a new kind of superstructure. Today, we have an opportunity to take this conversation to the next level, to think about teams and how those teams can actually close gaps for so many learners. I want to thank Katie Godwin at the Education Commission and Brett Madden on my team for engaging us in this conversation. Thank you to the rest of the Education Commission team, Liesbet, Amy, Charlotte, Anna. Thank you to all of our guests who are speaking today and contributing to this really important conversation. And thanks to all of you for your interest and your participation. We will start today with a keynote conversation, and then we will hear about evidence to support learning teams. which will be followed then by 3 global case studies of how learning team approaches have been used in different contexts. And we'll finish with a question and answer period with speakers to discuss how to move forward with learning team approaches. Please remember, include any questions or comments in the chat throughout the event, and we hope you enjoy our time together. Liesbet, over to you.
Thank you so much, Carole, and thank you to all of you who are joining us today. My name is Liesbet Stier. I am the director of the Education Commission, and I am so excited to be joined by Carole and Lucy today because you are really our heroes. Carole, when you talked about 4 years ago, when we started thinking about this idea of learning teams, when we were back in the day, starting the research work and the report, we were scouring the world for people who were like-minded. And it was actually hard to find. And I remember the excitement that we had when we found you in Arizona State University, and I remember visiting you. And we thought, wow, actually, there are other people thinking exactly in the same way. And it's hard to find that at the moment, but it was a real point of light for us. And we were really impressed by the way you didn't only look at this concept in Arizona State University itself, but also how you are working with local disadvantaged communities in Arizona State, which for us who are working in developing countries, we thought that's where all the problems are. We need to concentrate there, but actually there's a lot we can learn also from high-income country contexts and disadvantaged communities within even very advanced countries like the United States. So first of all, I want to thank you, Carole, because you've been an inspiration to us, and all the work you've been doing has been wonderful to also advance these ideas. And then I also want to introduce, of course, Lucy Lake, the CEO of CAMFED. I'm sure many of you, probably most of you, will know Lucy. But she has been guiding this incredible organization, Campfed, that has worked with disadvantaged girls around the world, has reached millions of girls by using very innovative approaches, and has in the process also created a generation of women leaders. And Lucy, you are part of the global women leaders. You've got lots of prizes. You were awarded the Yidan Prize. Even the Queen of England gave you an honor. People really have appreciated the work you have done, and so have we. So we're incredibly grateful to have you here today. So the Education Commission flagship report called The Education Workforce, Transforming the Education Workforce, came up with a new approach, or the approach that was mentioned also by Carole, where we were looking at how could we indeed think about learning teams instead of just teachers, to help us address some of the most pressing problems in education, whether that's achieving even foundational learning, whether that's getting to the most marginalized and those left behind, or whether that is actually offering greater personalized learning, making sure that we can adjust our teaching to the level of the learners. So the learning team approach is such a shift, because it actually moves us from thinking as we did and have been doing over many years, of teachers at the center, and really trying to think about how we can strengthen the teacher at the center with all the children around him or her, to saying, let's just take the learner at the center and then think about all the people that we need to surround the learner with, including very important teachers, but have look at other types of professionals as well that can help and support that teacher. So EWI, the Education Workforce Initiative of the Commission, over the past few years has been bringing together evidence from around the world to see where is this kind of approach already happening. And we've not only looked at education, but also at health and early childhood development, where this is a more common way of doing things. And as I said, ASU's Next Education Workforce Initiative, as well as CAMFED, have been huge inspirations in this. So I'll turn now to my two wonderful guests and try and get some information out of you. And Carole, I'd like to start with you, because why do you think this is relevant today to us, maybe even in the pandemic, much more so? Why is it relevant to take this approach to improve our education systems? You're on mute, Carole. Yes, great.
You know, so much of what people don't see or understand, I think, is that our education systems today are not sustainable the way that they are. That if we continue to have what we always talk about is teacher shortage, but unqualified, underqualified, not enough teachers, we're bringing bodies in to be in a classroom. The education system is simply not sustainable. And so as we talk about teachers on teams and building teams, we are talking about fundamentally changing both the working environment and the learning environment at the same time. Somebody said to me the other day, it's a double bottom line for us. It's always about teachers and about learners. And we think that this approach, as we have really kind of gotten more and more engrossed in it and looking at what happens and how it happens, is one, it ends up being more inclusive. It allows for a greater diversity of people to surround children, including people who look like them. It brings teams, you know, different curricular, cultural perspective together as knowledge and resource. It's personalizing learning for students, as we're seeing students now that have been out of school, particularly now, right? We see disparity that is growing. We're going to have to pay attention to how we personalize, how we deepen learning, how we better understand need. That teams mean that time taken with individual issues, right, don't take learning time away from all. That learners get the attention that they need for diagnosis, for care, for understanding, for learning, for opening more doors, for more access to resources. And distributed expertise means, right, that you don't have one teacher with many different, you know, expertise in different rooms. Now you're able to actually utilize that expertise in one place on a team. Teachers begin to work the same way that the rest of us work in organizations where we all distribute expertise. So this change in the learning and working condition, I think, is significant if we are actually to sustain the education system across the globe.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. That is a really good summary. Lucy, tell us a bit about CAMFED. What is it? What does it do? How is this learning team approach relevant to it? And how do you think has this been really important to reach actually those that are furthest behind?
Sure, thanks, Liesbet. And just to say that I think we have very much valued the opportunity to engage with the Education Commission around this and actually to find a community which is exploring and bringing to the fore the whole issue of learning teams. So at CAMFED, our learning team approach has really developed right from the outset. And currently it's centered on a role known as a learner guide. She's a recent female school graduate who returns to her local school and signs up to an 18-month commitment to deliver a complementary curriculum, complementary to the academic curriculum, that's focused on life skills and well-being and is integrated into the school timetable. And she's assessed for her pedagogical practice and receives accreditation, which in turn enables her transition into formal teacher training or employment. And how she's positioned, and to pick up on Carole's point, is very important because she's not low cost, unqualified teaching workforce. It's very important that she's positioned in to play a particular role in supporting and delivering a curriculum around well-being. That it is important that she's seen as being part of a team who is linked to school authorities, linked to teachers, and linked to other authorities. Because what she is able to do is really engage with some of the invisible issues, the invisible challenges that are impeding the most marginalized children from engaging effectively in the classroom and learning. So one example of that is academic self-esteem, which we found in our work was the second highest cause of dropout among girls after poverty-related reasons. And the presence of learner guides within the school system can help surface these issues. And because she's part of a team who is connected with teachers, with school authorities and with other local authorities, has the network to be able to deal with these issues. And I mean, just as a final note, Liesbet, you raised the issue of the pandemic. I think what we've seen recently and through these last few months is that learning teams are there already within communities. And I think that the pandemic has really exposed that. But often these learning teams are informal, they're unresourced, they're carried by women within the community. And I think that now is a moment to really bring more attention and spotlight and resource behind them.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And in that way, the pandemic has helped actually move this issue forward. And I also fully agree with you that I think what this also has done is emphasize that learning is more than just the academics. There is so much more that needs to be taken care of during a learning process. And you need different types of people to do that. So that's a really important element. Carole, the impact, obviously, of this new concept is huge on the education workforce itself, and included in that on the teachers. How is that affecting the way or the way you see within the Teachers College, but also more broadly, how do you see that affecting the training and development of teachers?
So I think, it's interesting, again, we always look at, we spend a lot of time looking at what the normal is and then think about, okay, what shouldn't be the normal anymore. When you look at the normal of teacher preparation, where you take your classes, do your clinical experience, maybe it's a semester, maybe it's a year, with a mentor teacher. And whoever your mentor teacher is who you become, because experience trumps the courses. There are rarely electives in teacher preparation. It tends to be very prescriptive in terms of what you need to know and be able to do based on a set of standards from, in our case, the state, sometimes the ministry. There's skills that we do not teach because we're training for a one teacher, one classroom model. So whenever you think about what you're training for and the environment, that's what those are the skills you're going to focus on. But I think there's a whole lot of other skills. Supervision has always been about the individual and individual assets and the requirements that I think are impossible. It's a very long list when we look at what the expectations are. So the minute that you start to think about teams, it's a game changer for teacher preparation. Now, teacher preparation has to think about a new way to work with partners that leverages assets in new ways and pushes on the system in some very different ways. It means teacher preparation has to change, schools have to change. We really get to what I think John Goodlad always said was about simultaneous renewal, that we are changing, universities are changing, but schools also, we're pushing schools to actually look different, feel different, create new kinds of learning environments. And the model also pushes teacher preparation to think about, teachers via teams. Now, how do we create specializations early in teacher candidates' journey? How can we build more experience for teacher candidates and move away from the one teacher candidate, one mentor model? So now how are they being prepared in teams? And alleviates problems of always having to find the perfect mentor. Supervision now is about individuals, but it's also about new skills, about how teacher candidates work on teams. What does that mean? How do they team? How do they distribute expertise? How do they personalize? So many other kinds of things now we think about in terms of what teachers need to know and be able to do. And on the school side, now we're also having to think about how we train classroom teachers in new ways and what clinical experience looks like and who are those teachers that are now working with teacher candidates. and how do they distribute expertise and personalize learning? It's a big shift on both sides. It will be a tremendous shift for teacher preparation, but no time like the present.
Yeah, that is certainly true. So, Lucy, this actually seems very complicated. So I could imagine someone looking at this and saying, well, this is having just a teacher to train and then deploying that teacher seems much simpler. So given the complication of this, how do you actually scale something like that? And how do you scale it also in a developing country context, which you've clearly done? We'd love to hear about what your experience has been, especially in these difficult areas you've been working with.
Sure, Liesbet. Well, actually, I think that a local learning teams approach, I think by definition allows for scale, because it allows for the system to be responsive locally to local need. So I think the fact that it is powered locally is why it can scale. And that's why I think as we consider scaling, I think it's really important that we don't explore this in a top-down way of introducing a model, that it has to be very much about resourcing a bottom-up approach to learning teams. And just going back to the point of the fact that I think in the recent months, we've seen these informal learning teams emerge. I think there is an opportunity now to bring more definition and more resource behind that. And I think that's why we're going to be able to be in a position to scale. And I think as well that in terms of scaling within government systems, that's also going to take a broader conversation that goes beyond education, to recognize that this is a cross-sectoral approach, and it's going to require that we really break down more into components and what is required within a learning team, what can be achieved within a learning team. So the learner guide that I described is very relevant to ministries of youth and employment, for example, in exploring ways in which school graduates can become meaningfully engaged within a learning team. And so I think there is an opportunity to be able to explore in the scaling process and with governments and how we can take this out and beyond education, and thereby find new and different kinds of resources to bring to the table behind learning teams.
Yeah, I think you make an incredible important point there about the need to embed things in government systems as well, or in systems as a whole. And it is that sort of bottom-up, top-down approach. Just to close, maybe Carole, could you tell us a little bit about that, how that has concretely happened or is happening in Arizona State? How do you embed something innovative like this in entire systems that are pretty large, even in just one state in the United States?
You find the willing. Right? I mean, it's always the case, I think, whenever you're trying anything new. We found 14 districts here, right, who said, that's interesting, and we're moving ahead. And it's small, right? All of them, they look very different. We've given people a lot of leeway. We're now trying to figure out how to manage all of that. But we now have the largest district in the state that's saying, no, we want 50% of our schools to be next education workforce schools in 2 years. So people are seeing, I think, the benefits of this. And I think understanding that we cannot continue the way that we have been. And you go with those who are getting on board. We're seeing the cracks in the normal. If the pandemic has done anything, it has helped us really illuminate the things that we've seen for years, but we've virtually ignored. And we can't ignore this inequality for any longer. It has got to be all hands on deck. And that means, we're training community members, and as Lucy says, and we're thinking very differently about the roles that people play, who's on these teams. This is not just teachers. This is really thinking very, very differently.
Yeah, Lucy, you want to, as a closing remark, also say something about kind of the pandemic issue. How are we now going to actually take this as an opportunity, something that has been devastating for the education sector? How do you do that within CAMFED? How are you bringing evidence together? How are you trying to capture this moment and use it to propel ourselves into this next, or the new normal, or the next sort of way of doing things?
Yeah, absolutely, Liesbet. And just to pick up on Carole's point, I think if we're going to achieve the system change, it is about finding the champions of change within the system who can be that driving force. And to your point, I think as we garner the evidence for the kind of learning teams approach over the recent period, I think there's going to be a lot to be able to consider. So, for example, in terms of the return rate to school among the most marginalized girls, where we've had learning teams in place, we've seen return rates up to 20% higher than national averages. And these are among the most marginalized groups. And I think it really demonstrates the importance of learning teams in that outreach and that support that goes beyond the school system in a context of school closure to ensure that children have that continuity of support within and beyond the school community. So I think that the evidence that we're going to be able to gather as an education community is going to be fundamental to being able to position this for a next stage.
Yeah, well, that's wonderful, and we really hope that that we can indeed help also bring all of this together. So I will turn to my colleague Amy Bellinger, who has been leading this work for the Commission for a number of years, and she will tell us a little bit more about what on earth are these learning teams we've been talking about. Amy, over to you.